In a sport as hard hitting as wheelchair rugby, it can be really difficult to get even one Paralympic Games. But Chuck Aoki has had the honor of representing the United States in 3 Paralympics, most recently earning a hard-fought silver in Tokyo. Welcome, Chuck.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me.
Hey, man, I got to tell you, as I was watching that game with Great Britain, it was, that was a really hard-fought battle. It came down to really the final period, and there you guys were, neck and neck, but Great Britain started to pull away. But you guys showed a lot of heart. I mean, talk about the heart of this team that you guys never let down.
Yeah, it's one of the things we pride ourselves on is fighting to the end. We know that we play a physical, intense game, as you referenced, but it's also a long game. It's 4 quarters long. Games at the highest level last an hour and a half, 2 hours, where you're nonstop pushing your chair. And we know that a game isn't decided in the first quarter. It's not decided in the second or third. It almost always comes down to the fourth. And so it was a battle. Great Britain outlasted us in the end. But I was, in an interview right after the game, I was telling everyone I was so proud of the team. I was so proud of what we've been through, not just in that game, but what we've really gone through the last year and a half, with the pandemic and everything to even get to that point, to make it back to the championship game. Was something that's such an incredible honor to get to do. And I was so proud of the way everyone fought. And it obviously didn't end quite the way we wanted it to, but we certainly showed a lot of heart and a lot of commitment to really try to do our absolute best.
Speaking of the last year, Chuck, I noticed as I was doing a little researching on you that you had a pretty tough 2021. You took on 6 surgeries on an infection that you had. How did that cut into your immune system, and how hard was it for you to re-peak and get ready to go to the Paralympics in 2021?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was tough. It was really tough. It was in January of 2021. I came down with a really serious infection in my right knee that, like you said, took about 6 surgeries before we finally got a handle on it, got it covered. And I wasn't actually able to get back to training until May of that year when the games were in September. And so it was tough. I had to work about as hard as I've ever worked in my entire life, quite frankly, to get back to the level I knew I could be at to compete. And it was scary for a long time, especially when I was, going these surgeries and we couldn't figure out what was wrong. Like I said, we'd go in and come out and say, okay, we think we got it this time. And then a few days later, I was still sick, or I was still getting, still looking bad. So, okay, we got to go in again. And it was a really scary time. It was something that was really challenging for me personally to go through. But like I said, luckily I came out of the other end, finally, made it through. And like I said, I worked incredibly hard. I think I trained, literally the hardest I'd ever trained in my entire career for about 3 months straight, probably, 5-6 days a week, at least 4 or 5 hours working out. It was brutal. It was intense. It wasn't something I had wanted to do, but like I said, I was just thankful I was able to get back to the level that I was able to be at and help the team compete in Tokyo.
Well, you certainly did that, and I'm glad that you rebounded because, we all know that, health comes first and sports has to come second. But, man, you guys really did a great job. And we'll go back and readdress that game a little bit. But, Chuck, I was thinking about this when I was getting ready to talk to you. You've been around through the modernization of the game of wheelchair rugby. When you think about it, back in the 70s when it was started up in Canada as murder ball, they had basically adapted daily chairs with maybe beefed up. They brought them to, some hack welder and they put some hoops and loops and things on it just to keep the guys from dying and the chairs from breaking. But then in the 80s, it got a little more sophisticated. I would say probably from my perspective, 96-ish, the Atlanta games was when I started to see a formalized game with a strategy and probably even everybody in chairs that were designed explicitly for wheelchair rugby.
Yeah, I think that timeline is about right. Obviously the 70s and 80s are a little before my time, but from talking to the history, I like to call myself a student of the game. I love learning about the iterations it's gone through. I think that's about right. The 90s is when, like you said, it made to the Paralympic level. This is when it's like, okay, this is something for real. We're competing for medals. And obviously guys took it seriously before, but that's when it really became a formalized professional thing. And it's really been amazing to see how far the sport has come in my time in the career. When I began, we didn't have a shot clock, still, or we just adopted the shot clock, I should say. And we had some timing rules were still longer than they are now. We've cut them down, and it's really turned the game into something that was always wonderful, but I think it's even become even more fast paced, even more exciting, even more spectator friendly, which is really one of the goals, is to have sports that are exciting for people to watch.
So here we go. We move into the 2000s. And so you and I first met probably about 2010, and you were coming into the sport, emerging as somebody who could make it to the Paralympic level. Now we're really starting to see change in the game. I mean, now there are truly formalized chairs, formalized plays. Talk a little bit about what happened between when the sport really became legitimized between 2010 and say 2021, because just at that point, I guess you would have to say that wheelchair rugby really became maybe one of the three top sports in the Summer Paralympics.
Yeah, I would say that. I think what really helped was a few things, really. I think one, the chair technology, I think, was really getting perfected around that 2009, 2010 time, and really becoming the high level. And there's several manufacturers in the world who make really high quality chairs. And so at the elite level, everyone had access to the absolute best equipment. So I think that at a baseline, puts everyone at a certain floor and says, okay, we've all got the best equipment now. So equipment is no longer holding anyone back. This is something that really matters. And then I think the second part is that Paralympic athletes as a whole have become taking it more seriously, quite frankly. They're always, in the history of Paralympics, there's always been athletes who took it seriously, of course, but there was a lot who I don't think necessarily did. But I think, in the time period you referenced, the last 10, 11, 12 years, you really saw almost all Paralympic athletes say, hey, I want to be the absolute best I can be. I want to be the absolute best athlete I can be. And so that meant not just taking the sport seriously, but it meant taking everything that went into it seriously. Training, diet, film study, collaboration with teammates, everything that goes into being a professional athlete, even if the compensation isn't quite to the same level, but it meant taking it really seriously. And so I think that's one of the things you saw really take hold in wheelchair rugby is athletes taking it incredibly seriously. And really believing in this, wanting to grow this sport into something that was fantastic. It's an exciting sport. It's fast paced. I think we've seen the fitness level of players up and down the classification spectrum become so much higher. The game has gotten harder hitting. It's gotten faster. The rules have changed a bit to make it a faster paced game. So it's not quite as laid back. You have to really be in good physical shape to play at the highest level. And so I think it's that confluence of factors that really has brought wheelchair rugby into the upper echelon of Paralympic sport, hopefully, and really, like I said, an exciting sport for spectators to watch and an even more exciting sport to get to play.
Chuck, it's evident to everybody that wheelchair rugby is a rough game. And probably I'd say if you've been interviewed 100 times, 99 and a half of those times, people keep talking about the collisions and how rough it is and how you guys knock each other to the floor. But there's so much more than that. And I know you pretty much, answered this question, but if you could go on a little bit further, what would you want people to know about wheelchair rugby beyond the roughness of the game?
Yeah, I like to say it when people first see the sport, they get the sounds and the sights of the crashing and the smashing are what initially hooked them. And then when they actually learn about the depth of the strategy that goes into the game, that's what really, makes them a fan of the sport. I've had lots of friends say to me, oh, when I first saw it, it was awesome, smashing. But then when I learned about it, I was like, wow, there's actually a lot of complexity to it. I say it's a lot like chess in terms of, you referenced earlier, we have plays, we have sometimes really in-depth offensive and defensive strategies that we're trying to implement as a team. And of course, the other team is trying to do it as well. And so there's a ton that goes into the game because we have quite a few rules about, ways you can force turnovers. We have a key defense, which is very similar to like a zone defense. We have man pressing defenses. There's all kinds of different strategies that go into the game. And I think the complexity of it is what makes it so hard to play, it's not easy to get to the level physically to play at that level. Certainly, don't get me wrong. But you also have to achieve a really high mental level to play the sport at the highest level, because everybody's fast once you make it to the Paralympic level. There's nobody out there who's just slow and not, can't keep up. Everyone can keep up. And so if you can't keep up physically and mentally, that's when we see players fall to the side, and I always tell people that I think that's really what separates the elite athletes from just the merely very, very good physical athletes, is the ability to perform mentally at a very high level. You have to think incredibly quickly, and sometimes you can't even think. You just have to react, and your reactions have to be so well trained that there's no time for hesitation. You just have to do it, so to speak. And so I think that that's really what makes the game so exciting, is that while, yes, you have to be in great physical shape, you have to be ready for the contact, there's also an immense amount of strategy that goes in, whether we're trying to force the ball into the other team's best player, away from the best player, or sometimes, we think we actually can stop the other team's best player. Let's put the ball in their hands, and we trust that we can stop that guy. There's a lot of really in-depth strategy that goes on within the sport itself, which I think is really what makes it such a wonderful sport to watch and compete in.
I'm curious, as you came through the sport, who were some of the stars that you isolate that you either admired or thought were particularly influential in the game?
Oh, wow. How much time do you have? No. So, there's been, Wheelchair Rugby's had so many phenomenal stars and athletes who I think have done well. And the most recognizable one, but one who I really enjoyed watching play a lot, was Mark Zupan. He obviously was in Murder Ball, so had a lot of really big credit from that. But the way he played the game was actually so patient and so thoughtful that it's something I've really, like I said, when I first got into the sport, I really admired it. I really thought that his ability, as I mentioned, it's such a high-paced, high-flying game, his ability to kind of slow it down and focus and then attack at the right moment, I thought was really incredible, and something that I've tried to adopt into my career in terms of being patient until it's time to go, and then when it's time to go, going as fast as you can. I thought Mark was one of the most talented athletes I've ever seen it do that. And so I've always really enjoyed watching what he did. And then on the flip side, classification wide, Scott Hogsett is also a player actually I always really admired watching. I think as a low point player, he was, of course, on the lower end speed wise and functional wise, but his intelligence was so high, and you could always see he had such a strategy and plan of what he was doing on the court. And then having gotten to know him over the last decade as well, his coaching acumen is second to almost none, I would say. And it's really been wonderful to learn from him.
Chuck, I think we could sit down here and have a fireside chat about this, but I'm going to cut you short here, just in the interest of time. Thank you very much, Chuck Aoki. He's got 2 silver. He's got a bronze. I know you're going to be shooting for a gold next time, and I'd love to hear more in the future. So join us again. Thanks, man.
It was my pleasure. Anytime.